So many interesting points. I think both. First of all, I want to say that we need to recognize and that there are many drivers of deforestation, not only in Indonesia and Malaysia, but globally, and consider what impact oil palm has played historically and what impact it will have moving forward. At the same time as we're addressing deforestation in oil palm, so should we be addressing deforestation for soya, for rubber, for timber, for pulp and paper, for whatever. There was a paper out just this week from Eric Maillard about the impact of coconut on species. It's far greater than that of oil palm. But of course, the coconut is not grown in the vast monocultures that we see in this landscape. Should we replace palm oil with the coconut? Well, then we can imagine what the consequences will be. So what this points to is that when we look at conservation and solutions, we can't look at anything in isolation. We can't say this is all about the orangutan and forget about the people and employment and needs for development of the country, the bangunan, I think is the word. And this is something that Orangutan Land Trust, many NGOs, the Pongo Alliance have identified as critical to any successful conservation of biodiversity is the consideration for all players, people, communities, development, industry, economy, landscapes, everything has to be balanced.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Pak Pungki, you raise
yes.
your raise hand. Thank you,
Thank
Pak.
you, Pak Togar. Yes, yeah. Thank you. First of all, nice to see Michelle and John, and also happy to hear the opinion that you both have raised. I have a simple questions, and John hinting or saying that there are patches of forest in Malaysia in between palm oil plantations. I get the sense that there is a hope for orangutan to live in those patches of remaining forests. We know as a company, we are required to conserve high conservation value, and also we make commitment on the high carbon stock. So there are patches of conservation areas, not big, but there are many. So the question is, how big can the size of a patches of forest be useful to accommodate a male and several females of orangutan? How many of them can be accommodated? We've been working with Biruti Galdikas, as you are aware of, and we kind of ran out of location to release the rehabilitated orangutan. So if our ACV areas can be a habitat, a new habitat for orangutan, then we probably need to explore further. Aside from that, my comment on the maps is, I think when we talk about deforestation, the critical issue is what is the starting point? What is the year that we are talking? If we are talking 1900, then deforestations occurred in Europe. If we're talking about 1980s, 1990s, 2000 and 2010, then yes, palm oil take part in converting the land. Although it was not from forest, it's already degraded, but yes, it's forest changed into palm oil after a process. In some parts, there are also new deforestations, which many companies are not taking part. So it's a complex issue, just like Michelle said, and we are doing what we can do. Unfortunately, the certified palm, even in Indonesia, is only about 10%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pak Togar, of the total production of palm. So we have a challenge of 90% production of palm that still needs to adopt the same principle and criteria of sustainability. But coming back to my first questions, can John or Michelle elaborate on the potential use of HCV areas for orangutan habitat. Thank you.
Michelle, shall I go first? And you might want to add. Okay, so Pak Agus, thank you for that. But some of my orangutan biology specialist colleagues are always telling me don't give numbers because they're misleading. People then grab on those numbers and they become a reality which may or may not be entirely true. But I'm going to try and answer your question, Pak Agus. So this is a particular area in Sabah, and I speak with some knowledge in the sense that I've lived in that area for nearly 40 years now. My late wife was born in a village there, and I've seen a sort of 40-year transect. And what I and my specialist colleagues see is this. Female orangutans do not move. They would prefer to die of starvation than move. They do not move. They stay where they are. If you have a patch of forest, and I'm sticking my neck out a bit, of several tens of hectares, you can expect that one female orangutan can live there permanently, possibly even two, which would usually be her daughter. Depends quite a lot on soil fertility. The more fertile the soil, the higher productivity there is of young leaves, flowers, and fruit. And then secondly, the species composition. So if that patch of, wouldn't even call it forest, sometimes it's just blucar, it's jungle. If it's mainly ficus species, if it has lianas, there's a genus Spatholobus, which we call in Sabah Acaremus, Blinjo, if you have those trees there, it's basically, it's pure orangutan food habitat, and you can stuff more orangutans in there. If it's like a rocky slope and it's all Dipracarps or teak, you can hardly support one. But they will stay there. So, and what we also observe is almost all those females in these patches, almost all have one or two babies. And you know, you may know that their cycle is about every 7.5 years they have a baby. So, and the baby stays with mum until they're about 14. So you tend to have one or two babies with them. So whereas the female's concern is enough food to produce babies, the male's concern, I'm going to say this very bluntly, is going to, this is polite company, mate with females. And they don't care. They'll go and do it. And they'll go across roads, through oil palm on a moonlit night. They'll walk at nighttime. And as long as there's enough food on the way, they'll make it. And we know of males that must have been doing this for at least 30 years now, and they're still there, unless someone either comes and shoots them or takes them away. So I want to stress this. It's a long answer, but I want to say that patch sizes of the few tens of hectares, but for these males, tiny patches, even one tree, can be vital, so they can feed up. As they're crossing the landscape oil palm, even tiny patches give them enough food. Finally, so in other words, basically it doesn't really matter the size. If there's orangutans there, and I really want to say this point, my own view is leave them there, do not move them. There may be cases, yes, of course we know where there's chaotic short-term conditions, you need to move some, but essentially, as the landscape evolves, it's in my view, and I think I'm fair to say on behalf of Pongolands, as far as possible, leave orangutans in situ. Those that are smart and lucky will learn how to adapt. And essentially, it doesn't really matter the forest patch size.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks, Pak Agus.
Okay, thank you, Pak Agus and Pak Pungkipa and John. Anybody else want to comment or to ask question? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Rifan.
Okay, thank you so much. And also, it's really good presentations. My name is Rifan. I'm a student of Wageningen University, Netherlands. So it's really good for discuss with all of the people in this group. Maybe I will do my research in this August in the Indonesian. Will be focused on intercropping. So related to practical activity in oil plantation in Indonesia, there are I think there are two things that focus now. For example, like how to improve the productivity, like by creating a new plantation. It means that yeah, like deforestation happen, right? Yeah, when we talk about the palm oil, it's also talking about the economic and also biodiversity. Yeah, because in one point, a lot of smallholder farmer Indonesia depend on the smallholder depend on the oil palm, and also they need income. So that's why this is the best plan to get the money. And then also talking about the orangutan, we talk about like how to move orangutan or create a new place to the orangutan, but I think there's a problem with the method in Indonesia. Like majority, when opening one area, they do like a slash and also burning the area. So that's why it's really hard to move them, because when everywhere is burning, so it's really hard for the orangutan to move one place to another place, right? So it's the problem. And the second one is like, when I read one journal that said that around 60% in Kalimantan and also in Riau get ready be replanting. So it means that it will cut again. I don't know how to do it. Maybe burn again or something like that. It's make a pollution happen again in Indonesia. So as we know, a lot of smoke over Indonesia, Riau, something like that already happened before. And also, in my opinion, like when Pak Togar said that about, yeah, they share about the orangutan location in Kalimantan, the place, and then where they want to go if the cutting the trees happen. So in terms of like when we want to replanting, I will focus on the replanting. Why we not to take a focus on how to arrange like intercropping? I mean intercropping with the permanent intercropping, because there are research from the CRC Göttingen. They do the research on it. It's a really good effect on it, because it will improve the biodiversity and also improve the soil fertility and also improve the productivity of trees. And also it's really good that maybe when we have a large land monocropping and then cutting and changing, but it's intercropping, not changing everything. Or what the Mitchell said that do it, change it with rubber, change it with something, everything, but we cannot do it. But how about we make like intercropping? Yeah, so I think it's a really good point. So biodiversity we can create again. Yeah, it will improve the productivity of the palm oil as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rifan. Anybody want to respond to that? Maybe, well, the slash and burn is not for the corporate things. You know, for it is illegal for us in the corporate to do slash and burn. But again, the actual question is slash and burn that what happened is actually for oil palm? Was it for oil palm or some other crop? You know, that is. I mean, you need to have that answer first, not really looking into. I mean, reading the media only, because media can create stories on that. You know, create story that is not basic on the factual thing. You know. So, Olivia, you want to add?
Yes, I'll just add a few words. Thanks, Rifan. I think when you do your study on intercropping, and if you focus on palm, you might, I'm sure you will find some interesting stuff. Yes, the burning is one, it's agronomically inefficient for palm. That's as much as I can say. You don't want to burn at all. And if you're a smallholder, you really don't want to burn, because you will try to harvest the palms to the very last minute. Because of what you said, smallholders need income. So yes, they will have an interest actually also to keep the maximum number of palms to the very last moment. You're touching to an interesting point, which is the intercropping, and it maybe relates as well to John's point. Theoretically, when you replant, you have a great opportunity to reinstall possibly some connectivity. But again, That's very well. That's easy to say for a corporation. We might. Musimas is maybe not the right example. Golden Agri might not be the right example. Yes, we will consider a bit more carefully if there is connectivity and what we can do. Very well. But if you're a medium grower or if you're a small grower, it might impact your production quite significantly. So even though you will replant with the best planting material, you will try to have the good practices. The government is happy to help. I think the NGO should be happy to help as well, because you want to be making more use, better use, if you want, of the land that you have at your disposal. But if you're really a small producer, not fully replanting will be a problem for you. So we need, I think what John said is really, you're right, John. The palm oil is there. It's not going to move like the orangutans. It's not going to move, but we really need to find a way of how you balance then the place of the palm in the landscape and where the orangutans need to go in the landscape. And I don't mean need to go as in moving them, but I mean where they want to go and where they will find ways to survive in a complex landscape and possibly dominated by palm. But yeah, the replanting actually, to me, more than the intercropping, sorry, but the replanting is quite a critical phase, both for the large growers and for the small growers. So there's more work that needs to be done there. It's also an opportunity to legitimize some smallholders blocks, and that's very important. To quite a few companies, I think now who work with smallholders, the replanting is the key moment where you can have the best access to smallholders, where you can have the best opportunity to improve their knowledge, to get them, like I said earlier, to get them to claim their right place in the landscape, and at the same time to improve their productivity, improve their practices. So yes, replanting, either be it intercropping, but just that opportunity, that's the time where the smallholders and the larger companies will be at the most receptive for changing practices. So it's actually an important point in time. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver. Anybody else want to add?
I could just say a few words about the burning, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah, the burning is quite misunderstood during these big events that we've seen. There's a lack of understanding of the difference between an hotspot and actual burning, and there's presumptions on the culpability. Who is responsible for setting these fires? Were they deliberately set, and so forth? And the presumption in media has often been they're all set by oil palm for the distinct purpose of clearing land to plant oil palm. And I think we need to look towards Global Forest Watch, WRI, and so forth to look at the information more deeply. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that which is shared by the media differs quite a lot from what the science is saying as for culpability, as well as where the fires are happening, whether they're in estates or outside of states, kind of thing. So as the fire season is upon us again now, I see articles saying that there's 700 hotspots that will be considered by many as 700 distinct fires in kind of Kalimantan, I think it was. And they're talking about provinces being in a state of emergency, but according to one of my Indonesian friends, it's not a state of emergency as we understand here, but a state of preparedness for emergency, which is quite a distinction that needs to be made.
Yes. Thank you, Michelle. Well, yes. Bart, you are first.
Thanks. Or maybe Pietro wants to go first?
No, Bart is first.
So yeah, I wanted just to add, Michelle picked already up on that. It's very important to keep in mind that over 80% of all 80% of all fires are not within the forest. So we really should start stressing as well that we shouldn't call it forest fires, but wildfires. Adding to that, we also need to keep in mind that during the 60s, 70s, 80s, exchanging timber for infrastructure and for GDP was a quite common development model in Indonesia, in Borneo and Sumatra. Any roads that you now travel on were basically logging roads before. So we need to keep this in mind as well, that there has definitely been a development model pushing this, and that it didn't go well in some cases, maybe many cases. We can have a long discussion on that. That is not really something that we can attribute to the palm oil sector. And a last point that I would want to make is that if I compare the situation in Indonesia versus the situation in Western Europe, I think we can easily say that in Western Europe, there is hardly any natural forest left. And the remaining plantation forests are also disappearing very quickly. Rivan is in Holland. I think there is three very old trees left somewhere in the dunes in Holland, and the rest is all plantation forests. This is a perception also that many Western people have. If you see a very degraded forest here, they still think it's a forest. Whereas as a forester, I would say these are just saplings and they have no viability in becoming a natural forest again. Thanks.
Thank you, Bart. Pietro, go ahead.
Thanks, Togar. Sorry, my image is a bit shaking today. I want to thank Michelle and of course John and Bart and Olivier for all these points. And I'm an ignorant on this, and so I'm very happy to learn as much information. The problem is that the rest of Europe, if we look at Europe, but I might say the United States as well, so the Western world is very ignorant about the topic as well. Meanwhile, I'm here trying to learn. The majority are not here trying to learn, and they mostly base their knowledge on what they read in the headlines or in the news, or worst, on the social media. So if I look at your great presentations, what I see is that we probably have to work on the communication side in finding reliable data, because when John says Greenpeace map is wrong, well, it's Greenpeace, so people look at Greenpeace. So we need to find data to kind of show that Greenpeace is wrong, or data that are reliable, and then we can say these are the good data. Then we can discuss the data are never reliable and there are lies, like famous British Prime Minister and Mayor of London was saying. But we need this data, and we need as much as accurate data and official data. And I know this is, I'm not sure for Malaysia, but I know that in Indonesia, there is a serious problem with data when we think about concession, when we think about deforested area and so on. So we obviously need that. Don't forget that last year in Spain, there was a food chain that took a picture of a piece of land and said in a statement for a commercial ad, here soon there will be a palm oil plantation. And there was a campaign to justify that they have replaced palm oil with something else, to show that palm was destroying forest. And I, contacted you guys and say, can we have a map of that area? And there was no data, and we need this kind of information. This is very useful for doing policies. Don't forget that there is the farm to fork policy right now. Sorry for the noise in my background. They're actually tearing down a forest. We need the left forest in Europe. We need information for helping making policies in Indonesia and in Malaysia, in South America, and show Europe that there are policy in place as well. Let's not forget that most of the information in Europe is emotional, and Europe lives out of emotion, particularly in this period of time, particularly during the pandemic. And most of the attention on the orangutan, with all the respect, is based on emotions, like with the tiger. So we need to use information to contrast rationally this emotional feeling. And that's, I think, is the effort that we need to do, thanks to the work that people like Michelle, John, Bart, and Olivier are doing. We need to be able to take this very important discussion that you guys are having and translate them into something that can be strong and meaningful. There are still thousands of companies in Europe that are replacing palm oil, and they are advertising with the free from palm oil claim that they have replaced palm oil. And that's a very bad attack to the reputation of palm oil. We need to use the farm to fork discussion to invert this direction and have perhaps them using or not using palm oil, but having a sort of certification label that shows that they are orangutan friendly, forest friendly, zero deforestation. But that's a path that we need to take. And I think that what we have ahead for the next 2 years with the farm to fork, whatever Europe is willing to listen or not, or the Commission or the Parliament, but we need to go there with strong messages and take whatever you said today and you will be discussing in the next weeks, put it in a nice package of messages and bringing them back to Europe. Otherwise, it remains a beautiful discussion, a beautiful scientific analysis for the academia, but will never get to European consumers. And in a way, I'm sorry to say this, it will remain useless and wasteless because unfortunately, this is what happens with academic discussion. So I think we need to take an effort to bring this into Europe and the United States, perhaps in a very solid way. So I'm happy to help, and we have done this for the past years. But we need at least to address data, and we need at least to come up with a coherent policy as well.
Okay, thank you. Again, sometimes what we read, this is for Rifan and also for anybody else, students or friends from campus, academician. Sometimes whatever that we read in the media media tend to exaggerate, what they're finding, or they just want to pick one or 2 words to sell the stories, So be careful on do your research based on media. There's one thing. Otherwise, you will be you have a wrong perception before you even know what is happening. So this again, that's why I make this discussion to make so that the people that involved in this industry can really tell to each other, hey, no, it's not what happened. This is what is actually happened. That's why also I invite academicians more and more, and also students from campuses to join, so that we can share the industry, can share the story to them. What is behind the news that they've been reading. So so that they can make really good sense of what is happening in this industry.